We never made promises to each other, not because we didn't care, but because neither of us knew how to promise something we couldn't control. There was no forever, no matter what. No clear future we talked about late at night, just two people choosing to stay in the present. At first, that felt safe. There was no pressure to become anything more than what we already were, no expectations we had to live up to, no fear of failing a future we never defined. We met in the middle of our lives, when both of us were already tired of explaining ourselves, tired of being hopeful for the wrong reasons, tired of loving with fear disguised as commitment. So when we found each other, we didn't rush. We didn't label what we had. We didn't ask where this was going. We just let it exist. Our relationship lived in ordinary moments, in late dinners that stretched into quiet conversations, in walking side by side without holding hands, in sitting together, doing separate things, but feeling less alone. There was comfort in knowing nothing was demanded. You never asked me to promise you anything, and I never asked you to promise me the world. Instead, we promised ourselves honesty. If it felt right, we stayed. If it felt heavy, we talked. And if one day it stopped working, we would let it go gently. At least, that's what we told ourselves. But the truth is, love doesn't stay untouched just because you refuse to name the future. Slowly, without noticing, I began to imagine you in places you never agreed to be. In my mornings, in my routines, in the quiet plans I made, only in my head. I didn't call them promises. I called them hopes, and that made them feel safer. You did the same, I think. Not with words, but with habits. You stayed longer than you needed to. You remembered small things about me. You made space for me in ways that felt intentional. Still, neither of us said anything, because saying it out loud would have changed everything. There were moments when I wanted to ask, where's this going? What are we doing? Is this enough for you? But every time the questions reached my lips, I swallowed them, because I was afraid of the answer, afraid you would say you didn't know, afraid you would say this was all it could ever be. So I chose silence, and for a long time, silence worked. We learned how to read each other without words, how to sense distance before it became obvious, how to pull back without pushing away. Our love was careful, measured, gentle, but careful love comes with a cost. One night, after a long day, I realized something had shifted. We were sitting together, just like always, same room, same quiet, but it felt different, not empty, just unresolved. I noticed the things we no longer said, the questions we avoided too easily, the comfort that had slowly turned into restraint. We had become very good at not asking for more. And I wondered if that was still love, or just fear wearing a familiar face. I wanted reassurance, not a promise, just a direction. But we had built everything on not needing one. So when the distance grew, neither of us knew how to cross it. You didn't leave. I didn't ask you to stay. We continued like that for a while, existing in something that was real, but slowly slipping out of reach. Until one evening, you finally said it, not dramatically, not with anger, just quietly. I think we're asking too little of each other. The words stayed between us. Because you were right. We had chosen a love without promises, but somewhere along the way we started needing one, not to trap each other, not to guarantee forever, just to know we were moving in the same direction, and the hardest part was realizing we weren't. We didn't end things with a fight. There was no betrayal, no sudden goodbye, just an understanding. That love without promises can be beautiful, but it can also be temporary. That sometimes, not asking for more isn't the same as being content. We sat together one last time, still calm, still kind, and for the first time we spoke honestly about what we wanted, about what we couldn't give. And when we parted, it wasn't painful in the way heartbreak usually is. It was quiet, like our love had always been. I don't regret loving you without promises. For a while it was exactly what we both needed, but I learned something from it. Love doesn't always need big words, but it does need courage. The courage to ask, the courage to want more, the courage to admit when something beautiful is no longer enough. And even now, when I think of us, there's no bitterness, just gratitude. Because loving you taught me that sometimes the most honest love is the one that doesn't pretend to last forever, and that letting go, when done gently, can also be an act of love.